Good evening, good morning. If you're listening to a podcast, you might be listening in the morning. Good afternoon if you're listening in the afternoon. Welcome to Property Avenue WA. This is a live stream we're doing now, but of course that will be uploaded to a podcast for tomorrow, and you'll be able to access our Property Avenue WA podcast via iTunes and all the different Spotify, Google Play, and all the other different avenues that you get your podcast. But this is episode, what did we say, 49, would you believe? So,
wow.
50 next week. Yeah, I know. So I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza, and between the two of us, we don't, our sponsor in actual fact, I'll tell you who our sponsor is. Our sponsor is our respective businesses. Yeah, we've got two sponsors.
All right.
Yeah, we've got Champion Bay Settlements, which is my business, and Dedicated Property Management, which is your business. But
awesome.
It's not about those businesses where it's just if you're new to what we're all about, it's really about WA property, and there's been an awful lot. And you may, if you joined us last week, we discussed Cyclone Seroja and the impact it had on the Midwest, and particularly Kalbarri, and we will extend a little bit on that. But the focus that we're about is simply about property in WA. So we consider ourselves your avenue to matters property in Western Australia. And wherever you may be, if it's property associated that you've got here in Western Australia, then we would welcome your contribution, be it questions, be it a particular topic you'd like us to discuss or a guest you'd like to discuss. I can tell you that we've got some, I do apologise, before we go any further, I do apologise that our guest that we had planned for tonight had a bit of a clash with another matter. And so we've had to postpone Gabriel for tonight, which is unfortunate, but we'll definitely get him back. But we've still got some questions and we've still got plenty to cover. So tonight we're going to cover a number of things. But what I want to let you know with regard to guests is that I actually came across a lovely young lady today who's been up at Northampton. Now, for those that aren't Midwest people and perhaps don't know, have not ever heard of Northampton, Northampton is about 50 k's, I suppose, north of Geraldton. So it's just before, it's a little community, a farming community in particular, before you then head off to Kalbarri, Port Gregory and Horrocks Beach. Now, they probably sound very strange names if you're not a West Australian. But this young lady, Tamika, we're looking forward to perhaps getting her on next week is the plan. And she has been up, she looks, is a psychologist, I think she is. And so she's been up talking to the community up there in Northampton after the havoc that's been created from the cyclone. So looking forward to having her. And you might say, well, why would we have a psychologist? More a case of having a chat to her, what she's seen and some of the things that perhaps people have experienced because they've lost their properties, they've maybe lost their dog, their cat, whatever it may be, but the impact that's having on people's lives and what that looks like for these people and what she's observed. What she did say today was that she was amazed as to the people's strength of character and their enthusiasm and their positive attitude towards it all. So we're going to have a chat, hopefully, with Tamika next week. And then the week after, we hopefully will be see if we can't get one of the local builders and just get their perspective of not just the Northampton thing, but, you know, you've got, there was a report today about Perenjori, which, again, if you don't know WA, that's a small community, farming community, sort of southeast of Geraldton, so northeast of Perth, and devastation. But they haven't had the publicity of some of the other places. Three Springs, another place. And I understand today Perenjori, they were seeking fresh fruit and veggies. They've still got no power and they've been decimated from that cyclone. So there's a lot going on, and certainly we will discuss tonight as well. Some of the, obviously won't discuss the clients because of confidentiality, but some of the things that I've experienced this week in talking to people the last couple of days that I've been up in Geraldton and the impact that's having on the settlement process, not just for the buyers, but also for the sellers. So we will quickly touch on those. The other thing that I want to touch on tonight, and we'll talk to Oscar about in particular, is the fake online. I saw an article where there's people, which is really, really sad, that are playing on people's emotions and there's basically fake online properties for rent, and people are outlaying money that they probably don't really have just to get a property and find it's a furphy. It's a load of rot. So we'll talk to Oscar about that. Another topic that I found really interesting, that there are some suburbs, as much as everything's going gangbusters, there are some suburbs in Perth that are just not experiencing the boom type like timeframes that some of the other suburbs are doing. So we'll quickly touch on that. And then the other thing that, again, we'll touch on with Oscar because of his experience with property management, which is his business, that there are homes. There was this article which staggered me, and it's a bit what you were talking about earlier on, Oscar, a couple of episodes ago. Homes that are sitting empty, waiting to have renovations or refurbishments done. And here's people living on the streets, pitching up tents, and we'll expand on that a little bit. And then the other thing being is we'll obviously go through Oscar's stats. And, of course, we've got an if question. Got a great if question tonight. So that will be our grand finale. So, OD, welcome, mate. Great to see you. And how has the week been?
Mr. Viner, thank you for having me once again. And episode 49, far out, the big 50 milestone coming up. Mate, it's so, just before we even get stuck into the real estate stuff and we focus a little bit more on the humanity side, and the cyclone, which it's only a couple of weeks old. Is it a couple of weeks old now? Yeah, it's probably not even more than a couple of weeks old. And the fact that life goes on for so many people and for just about all of Western Australia, but for the people that are affected in those areas of Kalbarri and Northampton. You mentioned Perenjori as well, and there's a few other farming towns as well. Effectively between Perenjori, Mingenew got hit really hard as well. And it's very easy for us to just get to carry on with our normal lives in Perth if we're not affected, down south if we're not affected as well. And we forget about what life would be like for these people, that they can't forget about it. They are living with it day in, day out, night in, night out, and are continuing without power, trying to rebuild their lives, the schools, their businesses as well. But not forgetting that there's so much other, I guess, Mother Nature stuff that we've had just in the last 3 or 4 months, which includes the flooding that happened up in Carnarvon. I think that was only about 6 weeks ago. There was some major flooding through the Gascoyne and up in Carnarvon, and that affected people's lives, properties and businesses, and certainly some plantations up there. There were the Wooroloo fires, which were obviously closer around Christmas time as well, which was only 4 months ago. And these are major, significant, life-changing things that happen for many families and many parts of the regions, I guess, in WA. And it's really important that we don't forget those, because those people, it takes a long, long time to rebuild, whether it's houses that are lost in fires or floods or cyclones. And again, we're not just talking about dollars and cents or bricks and mortar. We really are talking about people's lives. So, and when we touch on that humanity side, I think it's really, really important that we don't forget about it, and we do find a way to have that revisited in our thoughts. And also, not just our thoughts, if there's any way that we can make a contribution to those people that are affected, I think that's really, really important. The other thing that I was going to say, Mr. Viner, before we get stuck into the real estate side of our show, is I know that you mentioned to me just over the last week or so, there's been a lot of questions that have been coming to us, or in particular you, and that happens during the week, and you make a note of them so we can talk about them on Tuesday night. But to a lesser extent, we really do encourage people to ask questions over the course. For anyone that's obviously watching the live show right now, please feel free to jump on the Facebook page and type in any questions that you've got. That's not really going to work for the people that are listening to this as a podcast. But if you do think of anything or have any questions whilst listening to this, make a note, drop us a line, send us a message, send us a post on Facebook, and we'd love to address any queries or questions that you've got. Other than that, mate, just another really big week in WA real estate. I do sound like a broken record, though, because we've said that for almost every week this year. It's a very, very strong sales market. It's an equally strong rental market. And we've got the stats that really back that up as well. So, but again, that's not really all that different to well, probably almost the last 6 months, I think. But we'll go through the stats nonetheless, and in particular, compare the stats from what's happening now in our current market to where we were 12 months ago. I think that's always a really interesting stat based on what life looked like back in the middle of April in 2020.
I had someone, talking of stats, I had someone last week who I was talking to at length, and he was initially from Kalbarri, and he was very intrigued with the stats you had as to the progress that Kalbarri had made, but more particularly what was happening, because he used to have the real estate business in Kalbarri at one point. He was quite intrigued with regard to that. Before we go any further, because not only are we doing a live stream and you can physically see our disclaimer, but of course for those when we download our podcast, we must confirm our general advice disclaimer, which is the information on this podcast is to be regarded as general advice. We're now live. Your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. And we always
say
advise
that every week.
I know I get caught every time I do that. We always advise and recommend you seek personal, professional, and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property, and investment decisions. So, as we always say, get the right advice, get the advice that's going to suit your circumstances, and I'm sure that will help you big time with whatever you plan to do when it comes to property here in West Australia. Shall we go to the stats, or would you like to divert a little bit? What do you think?
No, look, let's get the stats done, because I think it'll be a relatively quick segment, and especially for those people that normally listen to what we talk about. But for those that are new to it, they'll probably will find the stats useful. I think the real estate person that you referred to that was interested in Kalbarri, I think I know who you're talking about there. And yeah, I think that particular person, or really anyone that has had anything to do with real estate in Kalbarri, really would find it useful to see that Kalbarri, just like probably Geraldton, and just like the best part of just about everywhere through our state, has really struggled through 2015, 16 and 17, started to turn a bit of a corner, and specifically 2019 and then 2020 to start getting some really good volume in the number of transactions, and people interested in the market again there in Kalbarri, buying properties, to then have something like Seroja come along and literally decimate the town. It's much, much worse than sad. It's absolutely tragic that that they're going through what they're going through for many more reasons other than real estate values. But real estate value is a component. So I don't think the people of Kalbarri and the community up there will leave our thoughts for a long, long time, especially given our proximity in Geraldton and really in Perth as well. The stats. Okay, the stats again, a very, very strong sales week just over the last 7 days in the Perth metropolitan area, 919 sales. And again, that's Perth Metro, that's not statewide. And typically for this market that we've had, where we know there's such short supply, such high demand, every week we're seeing 800 to 1,000 sales consistently every week. The really interesting stat here, though, TV, is this time last year, we always look at 12 months back as to how it relates to. This time last year, I just said there's 919 sales in the week just gone, but this time last year, there was 265 sales. So a drop of about 75% from what we've just done in this current week. Do you know why that is?
No, tell me.
Well, the reason why is because we were about 3 weeks into what we now know as COVID-19, the pandemic that has dominated play for the last 12 months, and 2 to 3 weeks into the COVID pandemic, it didn't just throw the real estate world into chaos, but it threw our entire economy in WA, obviously the country as well, into a complete state of disarray is one word, but uncertainty is probably the best word, where we didn't know where the pandemic was going to take us. We didn't know the impact on the economy and the real estate sector. And normally when that happens, people just stop and do nothing, basically. And that's exactly what happened. So we had a drop of around about 75% in our normal sales volumes that we were achieving. So listings, the current period, we're just over 8,500 listings, which in Perth is very low. It's just not enough listings. Normally, we are looking for between 12 and 14,000 listings, where we've got that a far greater balance between the number of sellers and the number of buyers. But as I said, we're just over 8,500, which means there's far more buyers than there are sellers. And coincidentally, this time last year, there were just over 12,000 properties on the market. So today, a bit over 8,500. This time 12 months ago, which was 12,000, which is a drop of around about 50%. The rental market, again, it's unusual to have such a strong sales market and a strong rental market, but we have experienced that for the last 6 months. Rentals, just in Perth, in the last 7 days, we've leased 712 properties, which is very typical of the strong market that we've got. And 12 months ago, in the same week, we leased 716. So very, very consistent numbers there. And our listings, again, we all know that we've got a vacancy rate of circa 1% here in Perth, which is well too low. We've got 2,780 properties available for rent through Perth. And this time last year, it was over 5,700. So again, it's around about a drop of 50% from where we were at this time last year in terms of our supply. So it's very easy to see why both markets are so hot, and both of them are short supply, high demand, and that's creating an inflationary pressures on pricing. It's certainly creating the FOMO, which is, as we know, is the fear of missing out. And for sellers and landlords, it's quite a good time to be either of those. And for buyers and for renters, it's a challenging time to be either of those.
It's really intriguing, and I'm actually experiencing at the moment. I've got a couple of clients whereby one is from Sydney, and her difficulty is just trying to identify a property that suits their circumstances. One of the things that I've had to try and explain is that the discounting of the advertised price is pretty much non-existent in this current market. Would you suggest that?
Yeah. In the main, only slight variation to that is there are some sellers that when they see the market that we've had for basically the last 12 months, then the greed factor starts to step in, and where if they price their properties right, they'll do really well. But if they go for the extra 20 or 30 grand, they'll probably actually take a step backwards. But in the main, the whole price discounting thing, if the property is priced and marketed correctly at the start, there's no discounting of prices. It's only how high is this one going to go.
That's pretty much how I explained it as well, to sort of say, well, you need to be sensible with with your offer, but you've also got to sort of rely on on your real estate agent with regard to having some understanding that you are not the seller is not sort of asking a price, as you said, where they're just being greedy because, well, it's a flying market, I can get whatever price I'm asking for. That is not quite the case, but it was certainly intriguing as to what their assessment was. And from being from Sydney, obviously the price is certainly affordable when you compare what you're buying there to buying here, but then still trying to seek a bargain, which, look, there are still commentary, and it's something I perhaps should do or we can do is, and you probably already can answer this, but it's been my understanding that the values we've got here at the present time haven't quite got to the levels of 214. Am I on the mark there? If I read that or see something about that at some point recently?
Yeah. And also, I mean, they're talking about, and I haven't gone into statistics to the level that I guess some commentators have, but I have also read other stats that they're talking about. We're now getting back to the prices that were in 2006, 2007. So, and we know back at that time there was a huge boom going on through WA, and then we know that in 2007, 2008 basically was the start of the GFC, where everything started to go backwards. So, if we're only now starting to get back to the point of regaining those losses over not the last 5 years, TV, we're not even talking about the last 10. We're talking about a sustained period generally of somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Back in my day, mate, when I was learning about real estate, and my dad was in real estate as well, we all knew every 7 to 10 years, that's when your property doubles in value. But for the last comfortably decade, and maybe even 12 or 13 years as well. So it's kind of rewritten the history books post the GFC, and where the next couple of decades go, we'll probably, hopefully, we'll be around to witness it. But it's all about regaining back to where we have been in a previous year.
Interesting comment with the same person. So I've been a lot of toing and froing in communication, but it got to the point after a few days, and there'd been no shortage of texts and emails and assisting, but sort of her comment was, this has been very stressful to ensure that I've got the sufficient budget, and then the stress just for house hunting, because it's been so difficult to identify what they want, and then the budget. And then, of course, of concern because not in all cases, being encouraged to put in an offer, but then not in all cases is there a specific price, which we touched on, might have been last episode or the episode before, where there is some situations where from $499 or offers welcome, but there's no specific price. So, there are people going through those demands, and that's part of our conversation that we've been having with our first home buyer in Kieran Hoey, and we must follow up and see how he's progressing. I'm sure he's going, but it is, let's not kid ourselves, that it's demanding for everybody, and it's also very stressful, not only for the buyers, but obviously for the sellers at the same time. So it's it's a challenging time.
I spoke to someone just today when I was booking my car in for a service, and the guy that owns and runs the shop, we always talk real estate whenever I go in there. I don't really know why that is, but I think he probably sees my shirt or something. And but no, we talk real estate all the time. And last time I spoke to him, he was looking around for the next house. He's got a growing family, and the current house that he's got is not suitable for the family and the direction that it's taking, I guess. And I said, "Oh, mate, so how's it all going?" And he said, "Oh, mate, yeah, I've had enough. I pulled out. It's just there's too much stupidity. There's too much FOMO. Some sellers are actually starting to get a bit greedy, and they're marketing their product." He gave me an example. I can't remember what suburb, but I kind of don't want to name it. But he basically said 6 months earlier, these people had built the property, land plus the house itself, and it probably, I think it cost them about 400 grand. And he made them an offer of 450. So 6 months after it's brand new, and it cost them 400, he made them an offer of 450 or 440 or something like that. And they were saying, "No, it's got to be 500." And he was saying, "No, but someone else was coming along and prepared to pay. Someone was prepared to pay 500. There was another party paying 510, and someone who was paying 530 as well. And he stopped it at 450. And just as a result of that, and probably one other negotiation that he had, he decided that he's jumping out of the market altogether, because he's not going to get sucked into this uncontrollable conditions where people, in his view, are making some silly decisions as to how much they're prepared to pay for properties because of the fear of missing out."
Yep. And that's the old FOMO has been regularly in the papers and regularly on various other magazines and whatever that you read and things online. FOMO is becoming a regular part of conversation when it comes to real estate. And that's not just a West Australian thing. You now have a look at those same conversations being had in New South Wales, Hobart, or Tasmania as a whole. and of course Melbourne, Victoria. So but certainly here in WA. Hey, listen, the other thing that I'll divert now, with regard to the Perth housing crisis, and I refer in particular to the rental market, and that's obviously something that's very particular with regard to your profession and your business, Dedicated Property Management. There was an article in the West Australian during the week, Perth housing crisis. Hundreds of government houses sitting empty despite record low vacancy rate. And when you read that article, it makes reference to the fact that there are these government-owned houses sitting empty. And, of course, we've made mention regularly with regard to the desperate situation for families. And I know people here that are, in fact, I had one girl today who's been able to extend her lease until tomorrow, I think. And after that, she's got to be out. Now, her settlement has been delayed a fraction, and there's still, because of the bank delays, etc., which is no fault of their own. But at this stage, we're hopeful it'll be the 29th, but she still needs somewhere to live with her partner. And at this stage, she's been lucky enough to find some friends where they will stay in a tent or a caravan in the backyard or the front yard of their friends, because they have no other choice. No other choice. And that's very similar to what I was asking before. I know that I've probably diverted a bit for the headline, but we'll go back to that in a minute. But that's very similar to what I was saying to you, and we were talking about with the building industry. What's going to happen with some of these people? Not some of these, a lot of these people who are waiting on their home to be built and have got the government grants. But, of course, the building industry is under massive pressure, which we well know, are not going to meet perhaps the expectations, not so much deadlines, but expectations. What's going to occur when you get a similar scenario where Tony Vine is building a home and TV is nowhere near that home being completed, but in the meantime, I've got to be out of my rental in a week's time?
Yeah. What's going to happen? Well, a few things might happen. One thing for sure that we know is not going to happen is you're not going to move into the home before it's finished, because the builder won't hand it over. So I mean, I know that I've heard of situations happening like that before, but that in the main won't happen. There may be situations like what you mentioned about that girl and that couple that are going to need to couch surf at their friend's place or caravan or tent on their property. So that will happen. There will be situations where some people just won't move out. So the reality is, in terms of notices and the Residential Tenancies Act, where people are given notice, and landlords or their property managers will go through a termination process of a lease in order for delivering up vacant possession. But there are some people, TV, that simply won't move out. And they understand that with all the notices that have been sent to them, well, you can send all the notices under the sun, but if you don't move out, then no one is allowed to come and lock you out, change the locks, organise someone to throw you out. That's just not the way the Residential Tenancies Act works. So and I'm not saying you should do this, because you absolutely shouldn't, but there are some people that will just stay in the properties until it does get to that point, and there is a time when you will be forcibly removed by way of a bailiff, but that it actually buys you a bit more time if you choose to go down that path. It doesn't do any good for your rental history and your future ability to rent a property, maybe even credit history as well. So I'm not advising that anyone does that, but I'm just saying it does happen. And some people might do it as an abuser of the system. Some people might do it, TV, because they literally don't have any other option. They can't go and couch surf. They've got a large family that's not going to fit in a tent or whatever it might be. So, it's going to be very challenging. But going back to your headline that you started this segment with, and that is the amount of government-owned, state-owned properties that are sitting around waiting for renovations or electrical compliance or whatever it is in order that then they can be tenanted. TV, I think you'd agree I'm a pretty positive person generally. I try to find the positive in just about any situation. And bad mouthing or being cynical is not really the way that I am. But I have to say, mate, our government, as good as they are in many other areas, the fact that we've got houses sitting there vacant that they could have been working on over the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, knowing full well that there was going to be a rental crisis that did not happen overnight. It has developed to the point that it is over the last 12 months, and everyone's known about it. And before the trades were taken up building the new houses because of the incentives that were offered to them to stimulate the building industry, there could be there should have been so much more planning by our government to soften the blow of the rental crisis that we've got by way of making sure that those properties, or as many of them, were ready to house the homeless or people that were about to become homeless because their rental prices were about to go up, or the houses they were living in were going to be sold. It could have been done so much differently. I think it's more than disappointing. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic that the government did not do better in this scenario. And again, the government's done very good through the COVID times and everything in many other areas, but this is not one of them. It could have been handled so much better. It should have been. And instead of now suggesting that private landlords need to be kind to their tenants and not put the rents up and not force evictions and all that, there is a humanity side and a moral obligation, I guess, when it comes to that. But if that is used as a diversion from their incompetence and their lack of planning with the houses that they still have to get them ready, then that makes me pretty annoyed, because I'm dealing with tenants day to day, some which are going into properties, some which are leaving properties, and I deal in this business every day, so I hear the stories, and I hear it from many other people as well. It's just not good enough, and they need to, someone, not me, even if I have, but someone needs to give them a real serve. They need to accept the responsibility, pull their finger out and do something about it, because they've got the best resource that anyone could have at the moment, and that is, I think, 900 or 950 properties right now that could take a good 3,000 to 4,000 people off the homeless list. And I know that they need to get these houses ready, but they could have been a lot more proactive than what they have been. It's not good enough.
Not even close to being good enough. It's 929 vacant government homes. That's the stat in the paper on the weekend, of which only 167 were ready, right? And of which only 5 have been let out at this point. So even the fact there's 167 that are ready and only 5 been let out, someone's got to ask some questions. And I think the difficulty with all this is there's no opposition to challenge this. So it sort of goes under the radar, in my opinion. The stats also advise there are 16,386 West Australians remain on the government housing waiting list. That's huge.
That's massive. Look, that list has certainly grown. It's always been a big list, though. So I think that list sometimes it's a bit like unemployment. What it doesn't show you, though, is the people that are out there looking for a job. It doesn't take into account part-timers. It doesn't take into account the underemployed or the people that are actually looking for jobs. So they pull it all together. And I think that waiting list is also an example of that. Notwithstanding the fact that we do have a housing crisis, we've got a homelessness crisis, and we've got a number of government homes that goes well into the several hundreds that is sitting there that don't have people in them at the moment, and it's just not good enough. Not good enough at all. And I think we have got a new housing minister with the re-election of the McGowan government. That came with a new housing minister, and it's not his fault, I guess, because he's just been dumped with what's left, and he has to work out the way forward. But he still carries the can today. He needs to make some very, very fast, proactive decisions and just make stuff happen. It's as simple as that. You've just got to do it. There's no other answer.
An add-on to that is when you have a disaster like we've had with the bushfires up at, I keep
Woolloomooloo.
saying Bullsbrook, beg yours?
Woolloomooloo.
Woolloomooloo, yeah. So in that region, what I'm saying, and then you have this natural disaster with the cyclone in the Kalbarri, Northampton, and I think I read somewhere or someone came back to me to say there's been something like 40 families have moved to Geraldton. But where are they going to live when Geraldton's only got, what was the statistic you had a couple of weeks ago? There was only just over 50 properties available for rent in Geraldton. I mean,
So
you
as
went
at
up to
today, it
Geraldton.
was 73 today. As at today.
Well, okay, but I mean, what I'm saying is, most of those, they wouldn't be sitting there waiting for applicants. They would have applicants up and ready, waiting to be processed. I mean, you were up in Geraldton last week. Did you have an opportunity to have a chat and see get a feel of what's happening on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Mayhem. It's absolutely mayhem. A lot of the real estate agents are developing a bit of a bad name, not because they're doing a bad job, but you've got that many people after such a short supply of houses. Tenants aren't getting emailed back. They're not getting viewing times. They're not getting feedback on their applications. So many of them are missing out because there's so many applications for the one property. So, and it's a bit of a human nature thing, I guess, that, someone's going to get caught in the firing line, and the real estate agents or the property managers, I think, are getting caught in the firing line at the moment. So long as they're doing their job correctly, and as far as I can see, they are. Their market over there is no different to the Perth metropolitan area. Short supply, massive demand, and there's no quick solution for it. Which even more so, therefore, means how could the state government have been so complacent and there was no talk of this coming, as we said before, there was no talk of housing coming up to the election. It was all about COVID and keep the place safe. There was a bit of mining talk. There was a little bit of infrastructure talk and the health, those things. But housing didn't cop much of a mention at all. And that was, it wasn't by accident. I think it was very deliberate. You know why? Because they've just cocked it up, TV. It's as simple as that.
The pressure on the property management, which you just touched on then, but the pressure on the property management profession, you experience it firsthand. You run your business, and admittedly it's a new business and you're still building that, but there's still got to be pressure on anybody in that field. The pressure on those people and those individuals must be incredible. I know what I've observed in talking to what I see on a day-by-day basis with my business with the settlement agency and talking to other settlement agents. But the fact that the property manager is not just attending to applications, but then, of course, having to look after the landlords and do property inspections, which are still a requirement. You do coaching around for some businesses when it comes to property management. What is the discussion you're having with those people? How's that discussion happening?
Look, I guess from the businesses certainly that I have worked with and continue to work with, because we've had a relationship over quite a long time, none of this has come as a surprise to us. COVID came out of nowhere, obviously, but from day one with that, we had a management plan, we had a coaching plan, and we worked through this week by week together. So it's not, I haven't walked in after 6 months of a bomb site or 12 months to try and pick up the pieces. But that's only with the businesses that I have worked with. I dare say there's other businesses as well that have survived and have been well prepared and well educated over this time as well. That all said, property management's always been a pretty highly geared, highly stressful environment because the property manager is dealing with human needs, and that is housing. You've got landlords on one side that have got financial obligations most of the time, and then you've got tenants on the other side that have got housing needs, but there's the financial component to that as well. So, and the property manager really is the middle person with that. It really has changed the landscape, though, TV, over the last 12 months with COVID. And now, more than ever, with the rental crisis, there will be stats that will come out a bit later this year, but there's already commentators and people in property management that are writing articles and pieces on the fact that there has actually been a bit of an exodus of property management staff from the industry, because what they've had to go through during COVID and now with the rental crisis, where there is no end in sight, like it's going to stay this way at least for this year. There's property managers that don't need that in their life. There's other ways for them to earn the money that they would earn by being a property manager. They can go and do any other number of jobs. And why, therefore, would they want to take on that level of stress in their life? See, the thing is, what's different with a property manager is we're dealing with humans and we're dealing with real life. We're dealing with the fundamental right almost or need in life, and that is shelter. And so when they leave their job at the end of the day of a busy, a busy 8 or 9 hours on the job, they go home to their shelter, and they can't help but think about the people that don't have shelter or aren't going to have shelter next week, or new people coming in that have got one hell of a story to tell about the last couple of months. So they're dealing with people, and they're people themselves as well. So you can't just cut it off and pretend that, oh, well, that's just what you do during the day. It actually takes its toll on them mentally. And I don't blame them if they make that decision that they need to find something else to do with their time. Well, they need to do what's right for them. Having said that, my background is I'd always be highly supportive of property managers in the industry as well. And if there's anything I can do to help, to share, to support them so that they can continue doing what they like doing in the property management industry, that's certainly a focus of mine.
I've just noticed the time. We've already consumed some 40 odd minutes. So there's a couple of things I really want to run through before we do that. I've had a question asked of me with regard to a partnership split. Now, it's probably something that you and I probably do know, and obviously with a background in finance, I'm certainly aware. But I was hoping, and we'll ask Gabriel when we get him back on, but a partnership split. So there's a loan in joint names, and I'm pretty sure a similar question has been asked in a previous episode some time back. But the loan is in joint names. There's a partnership split happening. So the two parties are going their separate ways. The property is to be transferred. What is going to happen is the property is going to be transferred to so it's in joint names. One of them's decided to pay out. In this case, this particular question is asked me is that there is no surplus monies. And so the question being asked is, one of the parties is said, well, okay, so we're no longer together. Why should I be responsible for the loan that's in place? Because we're split up. Although the property is in joint names and the property is due to be transferred, until it's, in this case, sold, until that property is sold and the debt is cleared and the refinancing of the balance of money. So we've talked about negative equity before, and this property has negative equity. The bank has agreed to the sale proceeding, and the one of the parties has agreed as part of the partnership split to take over and to service the remaining of the debt. So the refinance will be in my name only. But until that occurs, the question was asked, why should I be responsible? Under the banking arrangements and under your loan arrangements, you are both responsible. So if that sale doesn't go through and something happens to your partner, and again, this is a legal thing that we'll discuss with Gabriel when we get him on next. But as far as the bank's concerned, that responsibility for that loan, whether you split up or not, living together or not, while you have that loan in joint names and one's living in New South Wales and one's living in WA, you are both still responsible for that loan and the repayments of that loan until it's paid out. And so to answer that question, it's that simple, basically.
Yeah, I think that people go into those things with the best intentions, and it probably can't get stronger than a husband and wife that vow to spend the rest of their lives with each other. But sometimes those things don't go to plan. But the loan documents and the bank certainly doesn't see it as husband and wife or brother and sister or whatever. It's applicant one and applicant two. And what you do with your own personal relationships, I don't think they really care. For them, it's all about liability and I guess responsibility. So I agree with you 100%, TV. But you don't really think about it too much at the time, especially when you go into it with your husband or with your wife. That's what you guys are just going to do it together because you're happily in love and you've got the kids and life is great. Let's buy our next house. But the bank isn't involved in that relationship. And you are applicant one and applicant two.
Another question, which is a very general question, but I've had a client who I've been assisting again, and because, so, as I say, separate to my settlement agency, I have a consulting business, and these clients are looking to buy property here in WA, and their question was not quite, but we'll expand on it a little bit. So the question was sort of saying, well, we're not sure. What would you do? Would you, we've got a choice of a property near the ocean, which we like the idea, but then we've got another property that's close to the CBD. What was your choice? And as you pointed out before we went live on our broadcast, quite often the question is river or ocean. What's your, and as I pointed out, I said, look, I can't make that decision for you. I know what my personal choice is. I'm a big fan of the water, and so I've been fortunate enough to be in that, not necessarily have ocean views, but be in close proximity to the water. What's your thoughts on that as a question, as a general question? River or ocean, CBD, what's your choice?
Well, for me personally, and for just about everyone, it should always come down to, well, what's your personal preference? Because exactly. If you're the one that's going to live there, do what makes you happy. You've got one life, you may as well do what makes you happy. But if the question's more around investment and which ones are going to make more money, which ones are going to have a greater level of capital growth, and I dare say sometimes a question can be loaded that way. No matter what, it always comes down, they talk about location. What it really comes down to, TV, is scarcity. How scarce is what it is that you're buying? So if you buy something along the coast, well, there's only that many properties that can actually be along the coast because everything else must be in from the coast. And that goes the same for the river as well. But so far as the city's concerned, geographically, the city is over a much smaller area, like a physical area, than either the coast or either the river. So if no matter what, it will always be, in my opinion, in really, really high demand. And the closer you are to the city, I personally think the closer you are to the city, probably the more consistent level of capital growth you will get than if you chose the river or the coast primarily for capital growth. That's what I think, because the city is even more scarce than the length or the distance that the river or the coast would provide. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's very much, when it comes to investment, I've always had the philosophy of, and I've physically done this, where I have got the old compass and I've done the circle of the CBD 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, 15 kilometres. And as you know, I've had a couple of clients from the East Coast who have engaged me to assist them, and I've sort of made the assessment or given them my opinion to say, well, this is my philosophy when I've looked at investing in property, and the reason why I've worked on that philosophy is not only how good things are in the good times, and certainly we're going through that period at the moment when it comes to investment property and rental, but also what you're going to experience when the times get that little bit tougher, which we've had in WA, when the market is still good for those people, and in my experience, when you're close to CBD, a little bit easier to rent the place still are popular. And I like that reference you use as to scarcity, because that's what it boils down to. And all of a sudden people are still close for transport, still close to the city, perhaps their employment, perhaps they are here for short term, whatever it may be. And the rental side of it, the rental income, which is important when it comes to investment property, not just the capital gain, then that rental income has sort of got that element of stability. And so that's always been my point of view. If it comes to living, then I certainly have been a bit spoiled in that area. and I've had the exposure to both. But certainly, I love the opportunity of being near the water, whether I have ocean
Yeah.
views or not. Just being near the water, whether it be river or ocean, it's pretty special.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree, mate. I love the water. I guess the beauty about if we're talking about Perth City, well, the Swan River kind of goes right through the almost the middle of it anyway, so you get the benefit of the city and the river, and that's why areas that are so close to the city, like Vic Park, like South Perth, what else have you got? Oh, like the Dalkeith and the Crawleys and all that sort of stuff. Very close to the city, practically on the river as well. A little bit further away from the coast, but further, it's still only 10 or 15 minutes away. So, those fundamentals never really change. The only thing that would really change it, though, is if something significantly happened from a lifestyle point of view that people just didn't want to live in the city anymore. And it's often been threatened that, oh, hang on, they're going to start building the Joondalups of the world and, just different areas that is going to take people away from the city. But has that actually taken people away from the city, or has it, the city's still very, very populated. There's lots of apartments, there's still lots of office buildings. The city's definitely a place to be. So it would have to be a pretty significant change that would make people fundamentally not want to live in the city, and then therefore, it's not going to be all that scarce anymore because no one wants to live there anyway. But that's probably not going to happen in our lifetime.
Probably not. There's one quick question I will ask that's come to my attention, and again, it's focused with. I'll refer to a headline because I'm just looking at the time. Fake online properties.
Yeah.
I read an article where there's been something in the vicinity of 18 reports to the Department of Consumer Protection as to rental scams this year. That probably doesn't sound like a lot, but in my opinion, that is a lot. And I think the worst part is that people are losing money, and I've been advised that's probably only the people that are reporting it. And like a lot of these cases, people become embarrassed and don't like doing anything about it because how dumb was I? But mate, how would you consider how people should go about that in situations like that where people are desperate, and obviously those that are setting these scams up? I read where one lady, I think she had children, paid the money out, got all organised. The arrangements were made for her to pick up the keys because it was a private rental, I think, and because the person was living over east, just pick up I'll make arrangements for the keys to be left in the letterbox. Rocked up to the property and knocked on the door. The keys were there, knocked on the door, and there's people living there. It was already been rented out. Never even heard of these people. No such landlord.
Yeah, look, I think, and the landlord probably never had anything to, like the person who took the money from these vulnerable people, never had anything to do with that property properly in the first place. We're never owners or anything.
Exactly.
Look, the scary bit about this TV is that from a scam point of view, it's actually a really, really easy thing to pull off. And what makes it, I don't think that anyone's, all that dumb, I guess, but we have got a rental crisis on our hands at the moment, and there is that fear of missing out, people that don't know where they're going to be living in a fortnight's time or in a month's time, and that level of emotion and becoming irrational in your thought process and the way that you deal with things, if you did have a bit more time on your hands, sometimes that goes out the door. But ultimately, these scams, whilst on the face of it, it might look like an easy thing to do, the one thing that's common in every single one of these is these guys are asking you to hand over money without providing you anything. That's the bottom line. They're asking you to hand over money. They're preying on the fact that you're worried, that you're scared, that they've got someone else to take it if you don't take it, all that sort of stuff. And so and most of the time people are going to go, oh, hang on, I smell a rat here, or I detect something that isn't quite right. And those aren't the people that these scammers are after. They're after the ones that are vulnerable, only have till next week to get out, and have really got the pressure on them. And if they can con $1,000 out of them or $1,800 out of them or whatever it might be, then that they don't have any morals whatsoever. and they'll just take the money and then disappear. So, but there is one thing very, very common, and this is probably the way to spot it. If at any point in time you're going to hand over some money for nothing, basically, just on a promise, you're just going to hand over the money, and you haven't seen a property, you haven't met someone, you don't know anything at all, you've just had a conversation that is then going to require you to hand over money, don't do it. Just, it's as simple as that. Just don't do it, because anyone who does genuinely have a rental property, any real estate agent, any private landlord who actually has got something to offer you, would not expect that you just hand over money for absolutely nothing in return. Whereas from the scammer's point of view, all it is a conversation, probably full of promises, but the one thing that's consistent in every single scam, you hand over money and you get nothing. So if that's the reality of what you're about to do, don't do it. Simple as that.
Yep, could not agree more. Mate, I think we'll just about wind that up, but we could never wind up. I think it's been fabulous, and again, we let people know that we'll be having this audio. We're now available on podcast, and we will. It's been such a busy time where we've been a little bit slack. I'll say I've been a little bit slow in getting our messages out there. But look, if you have got a friend, or you've got people involved in property, or you've got friends over east, we would welcome them to subscribe and be a part of our conversation. We've got some really good guests. So next week we're hopefully having something different. We've got a psychologist is the plan, and we're going to discuss with her what she's experienced and what she's seen, and how people are managing and coping with the natural disaster that's occurred up in the Midwest region, and obviously get a perspective that not only would that be in the Midwest region, but other people around that are going through huge disasters and the impact that's having on them when their property's been burnt down, or in this case, the cyclones wiped them out. And certainly we will extend on that a little bit. We didn't quite get to what I was going to have a chat about, as we always do. We've got so many things to talk about. We could go on for 2 hours, but there's some really interesting stuff that we've had this week associated with the settlement process. And I think if I can pass on one message when it comes to the settlement, whoever you're dealing with, whether it be my office and my staff at Champion Bay, or you're dealing with whoever it may be, please understand that these people are trying to do the very, very best they can, and they're interested in looking after you. There's no doubt some will be better operators than others. That's just life. That's just business. But they are still trying to do their job under extreme pressure at the moment. So, and I think we need to understand that. And then, of course, that pressure extends even further when you have a disaster, be it a bushfire, or you have a cyclone that's wiped properties out or damaged properties. And then, of course, that's more pressure on the settlement agent or the solicitor. So you need to understand that and appreciate that. There's pressure on everybody. We understand that. But I think sometimes just talk to your conveyancer, or talk to your real estate agent, or talk to your lawyer, whoever's doing your settlement, and work your way through it, because people are prepared to listen. They're doing massive, really, I said to you today, Oscar, the hours that some of these settlement agents are doing is just astronomical. I know we have a policy.
I questioned it, because when you said the time was 7 or 8 and then out at 8:30, and I went, what hour of the day are you talking about? Because I didn't think you were talking about nighttime.
Well, I make a point of ensuring that my staff, no matter what, I try to. I don't know whether they actually obey me, but I try to get them out of the office by 7 p.m., rightly or wrongly. But I know I've sent my manager away for a break this week. When I say send her away, we encourage her to go and have a break. She's gone down south, and with a long weekend and an extra few days. But she's been doing 9:30 at nights, getting in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and working on weekends. And she's probably as much as that's a lot of hours. She's probably, compared to some, I know some that are working to 1 o'clock in the morning and back up again at 5. So, there is some really tough stuff going on out there, and you need to understand that. it's a
Yeah,
challenge.
mate, the other thing, before the if question, we've also got a busy few weeks ahead because we're going to have that lady on, the psychologist, next week. We've spoken about a builder. We've spoken about an agent from down in the southwest. We've got to get
Yes.
Kira back on as well. So we're going to have a pretty busy May in terms of guests on the show.
Yeah, and I'm going to make sure. I'm going to make sure that we get that message out there and let people know. So, and we'll certainly get Gabriel back on at some point. I'll hopefully catch up with him. I hope he's okay, but I do know that he had a fair bit on his plate, so that's not an issue. You and I, mate, we could talk forever about property, so there's no dramas. If a guest doesn't rock up, but we've got some really good opportunities coming up. And I've still, the other thing being is that I've been communicating with Daisy from Mortgage Mates. And she recently got married. So we're going to have a chat today. She got married over the Easter break with her partner.
Mate, we could have done the wedding crashes.
Yes. Pardon?
We could have done the wedding crashes at her wedding. We could have just.
No, I'll have to talk to her. Yeah, I'll have to say that. Daisy, yeah. So we're really keen to get the Mortgage Mates thing happening. So, yeah, we've got a bit happening. But the if question.
Yes.
If you had the opportunity of unlimited service for 5 years, let's say, be it an exceptional cook, chef to look after you food-wise for the next 5 years, every day, 5 days, 5 years, or you had someone to do the daily home cleaning and looked after the place and you didn't have to lift a finger and Beck could just live the dream, right? Or you had a fabulous gardener / landscaper who's going to look after your place and do all the things that you want done in your garden and around the outdoor area for the next 5 years. What would your choice be and why?
Oh, mate, it's a real easy one for me. I'd go the chef any day of the week, month after month for 5 years, because as I've gotten older, the appreciation of food, really good tastes, so many different parts of the world of food that I haven't even tried or whatever. So if I could research and pick and choose whatever I want, and I'm going to have a really sensational chef to put it all together for me, and then hopefully take on the role of the cleaner and clean up after themselves, then definitely the chef for me. What about you, mate?
Well, I think first things first, if you were going to get the chef, I think you should also employ a personal trainer.
Yeah. Oh, mate, look, I'm past that point myself in terms of I've kind of given up. I mean, you can tell by the grey hair as well. I've given up. I've got my person in life. I'm happily married, mate, and I've got a few kilos to lose, but I just make sure that the chef's going to cook for her as well, you know.
I like the idea. Yeah. I'm torn. I enjoy cooking, so I sort of feel, as much as that would be pretty special, I enjoy the cooking thing. It's one of my things that I do enjoy doing, and I pride myself in my cooking. I'm not as good as my younger son, but I'm okay. And I'm thinking more about my wife than I. As much as I'd love the gardener and the landscaping, I think I'd probably do the cleaning thing. I think that would be heaven. She's
really?
Yeah, I just think I would do it. As I said, I would do it more for the benefit of my wife, because I think Jude deserves that, and that would just be one load. Gardening, I don't mind doing, and whatever. As much as that would be pretty special to have a really top. I think I'd probably do the cleaning thing, because it's probably one of those chores that sometimes. I mean, I share the load, so it'd help me as well. But, I think that would be a bit of a bonus, just to allow us to be at ease and have a little bit of space, for a little bit of time for ourselves, rather than, I've got to stop today. We've got to do the cleaning the house and clean. So that's my thoughts. Hey, listen.
That's a well thought out answer.
Yeah, fabulous week chat again. Really, always enjoy it, mate. And I don't know why you ever thank me, because you're part of the show. You're my co-host, so I don't know why you always thank me. But it's something that the both of us do. The both of us thoroughly enjoy. To all of you out there, those that are doing it tough, those that are enjoying life, and those that are travelling, whatever it may be, if you're in WA or you're looking at doing something when it comes to property in WA, you're always welcome for us to give you some assistance. Look forward to you subscribing, be it our podcast or our live stream when we do it. But take care. Have a fabulous week. Cats and Eagles are playing this week, so that'll be interesting. The way the Cats played last week, I don't like their chances. But anyway, it's at home. We'll see how we go. But to everybody, take care and really look forward to seeing you all again next week. Cheers for now.